Neolithic. By 7000 BCE, some of the earliest recorded farmers had settled in Beta, a pre-pottery Neolithic settlement just north of Petra. Bronze Age. Petra is listed in Egyptian campaign accounts and the Amarna letters as Pel, Sel or Ser. Iron Age. Edom. The Iron Age lasted between 1200 and 600 BC. In that time, the Petra area was occupied by the Edomites. This came when the Edomites rebelled after the death of King Solomon in 928 BC, when Israel split into two kingdoms, for Israel to be in the north and Judah in the south. The Edomites were known as descendants of Esau, and this was referenced in the Old Testament of the Bible. The configuration of mountains in Petra allowed for a reservoir of water for the Edomites. This made Petra a stopping ground for merchants, making it an outstanding area for trade. Things that were traded here included wines, olive oil and wood. Initially, the Edomites were accompanied by nomads who eventually left, but the Edomites stayed and made their mark on Petra before the emergence of the Nabataeans. They were then engaged in battle with King Amaziah of Judah and chased back into their own lands. It is said that 10,000 men were thrown off of the mountain el Biara. This story has been debated by scholars, as it is in so-called biblical times. The Edomite site excavated at the top of the el Biara mountain at Petra was established no earlier than the 7th century BCE. Iron II. The emergence of Petra. The Nabataeans were one among several nomadic Bedouin tribes that roamed the Arabian desert and moved with their herds to wherever they could find pasture and water. Although the Nabataeans were initially embedded in Aramaic culture, theories about them having Aramean roots are rejected by many modern scholars. Instead, archaeological, religious and linguistic evidence confirm that they are a northern Arabian tribe. Current evidence suggests that the Nabataean name for Petra was Rakemo, variously spelled in inscriptions as RQMW or RQM. Petra as Rechem. Historian Josephus, ca. 37-100, writes that the region was inhabited by the Midianites during the time of Moses, and that they were ruled by 5 kings, one of whom was Rechem. Josephus mentions that the city, called Petra by the Greeks, ranks highest in the land of the Arabs, and was still called Rakim by all the Arabs of his time, after its royal founder. Antiquities IV. 7:1-4-7. The name, Rechem, RQM, was inscribed in the rock wall of the Wadi Musa opposite the entrance to the Sikh. However, Jordan built a bridge over the wadi and this inscription was buried beneath tons of concrete. Petra as Sela. See also Sela Edom. Section. Confusion with Petra. An old theory held that Petra might be identified with a place called Sela in the Hebrew Bible. Encyclopaedia Britannica, 1911, states that the Semitic name of the city, if not Sela, would remain unknown. It nevertheless cautioned that Sela simply means rock in Hebrew, and thence might not be identified with a city where it occurs in the biblical text. The passage in Diodorus Siculus, Zix. 94-97, which describes the expeditions which Antigonus sent against the Nabataeans in 312 BCE, was understood by some researchers, and not so by others, to throw some light upon the history of Petra, but the Petra, Greek for rock, referred to as a natural fortress and place of refuge, cannot be a proper name, and the description implies that there was no town in existence there at the time. Roman period. In AD 106, when Cornelius Palma was governor of Syria, the part of Arabia under the rule of Petra was absorbed into the Roman Empire as part of Arabia Petraea, and Petra became its capital. The native dynasty came to an end, but the city continued to flourish under Roman rule. It was around this time that the Petra Roman road was built. A century later, in the time of Alexander Severus, when the city was at the height of its splendor, the issue of coinage came to an end. There was no more building of sumptuous tombs, owing apparently to some sudden catastrophe, such as an invasion by the Neo-Persian power under the Sassanid Empire. Meanwhile, as Palmyra FL 130-270 grew in importance and attracted the Arabian trade away from Petra, the latter declined. It appears, however, to have lingered on as a religious center. Another Roman road was constructed at the site. Epiphanius of Salamis, c.315-403, writes that in his time a feast was held there on December 25 in honor of the Virgin Cabo, Chabo, and her offspring Dushera. Dushera and Al-Uzza were two of the main deities of the city, which otherwise included many idols from other Nabataean deities such as Alat and Manat. Between 111 and 114 Trajan built the Via Traiana Nova, running from the Syrian border to the Red Sea through Petra. This road followed the old routes of Nabataean caravans. In the shadow of the Pax Romana, this route revived trade between Arabia, Syria, and Mediterranean harbors. In 125 AD, one of Emperor Hadrian's administrators left marks in Petra, pointed out by documents found at the Dead Sea. In 130 AD, Hadrian visited the former Nabataean capital, giving it the name of Hadriani Petra Metropolis, imprinted on his coins. His visit, however, did not lead to any boom in architectural development and new buildings as it did in Jerash. The province's governor, Sextius Florentinus, erected a monumental mausoleum for his son near the end of the Al-Hubta King's Wall tombs, which had been generally reserved during the Nabataean period for the royal family. The interest that Roman emperors showed for the city in the 3rd century suggests that Petra and its environs remained highly esteemed for a long time. An inscription to Liber Pater, a god revered by Emperor Septimius Severus, was found in the temenos of the temple known as Khazar al-Bint, and Nabataean tombs contained silver coins with the emperor's portrait, as well as pottery from his reign. Emperor Elagabalus declared Petra to be a Roman colony, when he reorganized the Roman Empire towards the end of the 3rd century. The area from Petra to Wadi Mujib, the Negev, and the Sinai Peninsula were annexed into the province of Palestina Salutaris. Petra may be seen on the Madaba mosaic map from the reign of Emperor Justinian. Byzantine period Petra declined rapidly under Roman rule, in large part from the revision of sea-based trade routes. In 363, an earthquake destroyed many buildings and crippled the vital water management system. The old city of Petra was the capital of the Byzantine province of Palestina III, and many churches from the Byzantine period were excavated in and around Petra. In one of them, the Byzantine church, 140 papyri were discovered, which contained mainly contracts dated from 530s to 590s, establishing that the city was still flourishing in the 6th century. The Byzantine church is a prime example of monumental architecture in Byzantine Petra. The last reference to Byzantine Petra comes from the Spiritual Meadow of John Moschus, written in the first decades of the 7th century. He gives an anecdote about its bishop, Athenogenes. It ceased to be a metropolitan bishopric sometime before 687, when that function had been transferred to Areopolis. Petra is not mentioned in the narratives of the Muslim conquest of the Levant, nor does it appear in any early Islamic records. Crusaders and Mamluks in the 12th century, the Crusaders built fortresses such as the Al-Wayra castle, but were forced to abandon Petra after a while. As a result, the location of Petra was lost until the 19th century. 2 further Crusader period castles are known in and around Petra. The first is Al-Wuera, situated just north of Wadi Musa. It can be viewed from the road to Little Petra. It is the castle which was seized by a band of Turks with the help of local Muslims and only recovered by the Crusaders after they began to destroy the olive trees of Wadi Musa. The potential loss of livelihood led the locals to negotiate surrender. The second is on the summit of El Habas, in the heart of Petra, and can be accessed from the west side of the Khazar al-Bint. The ruins of Petra were an object of curiosity during the Middle Ages and were visited by Baybars, one of the first Mamluk sultans of Egypt, towards the end of the 13th century. 19th and 20th centuries. The first European to describe them was Swiss traveler Johann Ludwig Burckhardt during his travels in 1812. At that time, the Greek Church of Jerusalem operated a diocese in Al-Karak named Batra, in Arabic, and Patras in Greek, and it was the opinion among the clergy of Jerusalem that Karak was the ancient city of Petra. Burckhardt already spoke Arabic fluently, and was on his way to explore the Niger River when he heard whispers of a dead city that withheld Prophet Aaron's tomb. He then became fascinated with finding the city. He then dressed himself up as a local, and only spoke in Arabic, bringing a goat with him with the intent of sacrificing it in honor of Aaron's tomb. After one day of exploring, he was convinced that he had found the lost city of Petra. Léon de Laborde and Louis Maurice Adolphe Linant de Belfons made the first accurate drawings of Petra in 1828. The Scottish painter David Roberts visited Petra in 1839 and returned to England with sketches and stories of the encounter with local tribes, published in the Holy Land, Syria, Idumea, Arabia, Egypt, and Nubia. Frederick Edwin Church, the leading American landscape painter of the 19th century, visited Petra in 1868, and the resulting painting El Kazne, Petra is among his most important and well documented. Missionary Archibald Forder published photographs of Petra in the December 1909 issue of National Geographic. Because the structures weakened with age, Many of the tombs became vulnerable to thieves, and many treasures were stolen. In 1929, a four-person team consisting of British archaeologists Agnes Conway and George Horsfield, Palestinian physician and folklore expert Dr. Tawfiq Kanan and Dr. Didolf Nielsen, a Danish scholar, excavated and surveyed Petra. The archaeologist Philip Hammond from the University of Utah visited Petra for nearly 40 years. He explained that the local folklore says it was created by the wand of Moses, when he struck the rock to bring forth water for the Israelites. Hammond believed the carved channels deep within the walls and ground were made from ceramic pipes that once fed water for the city, from rock-cut systems on the canyon rim. Numerous scrolls in Greek and dating to the Byzantine period were discovered in an excavated church near the Temple of the Winged Lions in Petra in December 1993. Petra Arabic. Romanized. Al-Badra. Ancient Greek. Petra Rock. Nabataean. Originally known to its inhabitants as Rokhmu or Rokhamo, is a historic and archaeological city in southern Jordan. It is adjacent to the mountain of Jabal al-Madba, in a basin surrounded by mountains forming the eastern flank of the Arabah Valley running from the Dead Sea to the Gulf of Aqaba. The area around Petra has been inhabited from as early as 7000 BC, and the Nabataeans might have settled in what would become the capital city of their kingdom as early as the 4th century BC. Archaeological work has only discovered evidence of Nabataean presence dating back to the 2nd century BC, by which time Petra had become their capital. The Nabataeans were nomadic Arabs who invested in Petra's proximity to the incense trade routes by establishing it as a major regional trading hub. The trading business gained the Nabataeans considerable revenue and Petra became the focus of their wealth. The Nabataeans were accustomed to living in the barren deserts, unlike their enemies, and were able to repel attacks by taking advantage of the area's mountainous terrain. They were particularly skillful in harvesting rainwater, agriculture and stone carving. Petra flourished in the 1st century AD, when its famous Al-Khazna structure, believed to be the mausoleum of Nabataean King Aretas IV, was constructed, and its population peaked at an estimated 20,000 inhabitants. Although the Nabataean kingdom became a client state of the Roman Empire in the 1st century BC, it was only in 106 AD that it lost its independence. Petra fell to the Romans, who annexed Nabatea and renamed it as Arabia Petraea. Petra's importance declined as sea trade routes emerged, and after an earthquake in 363 destroyed many structures. In the Byzantine era several Christian churches were built, but the city continued to decline, and by the early Islamic era it was abandoned except for a handful of nomads. It remained unknown until it was rediscovered in 1812 by Johann Ludwig Burckhardt. Access to the city is through a 1.2-kilometer long, 3/4 of a mile, gorge called the Seek, which leads directly to the Khazna. Famous for its rock-cut architecture and water conduit system, Petra is also called the Rose-Red City, because of the color of the stone from which it is carved. It has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1985. UNESCO has described Petra as one of the most precious cultural properties of man's cultural heritage. In 2007, Al-Khazna was voted one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Petra is a symbol of Jordan, as well as Jordan's most visited tourist attraction. Tourist numbers peaked at 1.1 million tourists in 2019, marking the first time that the figure rose above the 1 million mark. Tourism in the city was crippled by the COVID-19 pandemic, but soon after started to pick up again, reaching 260,000 visitors in 2021.